Hi, my name's Chris Badilla. Today I'll be making a presentation on the estimating problem for my Project Management 500 class, Dr. J instructor. The synopsis of the case for the estimating problem is as follows. Angelica works for a company that frequently receives requests for proposals or RFPs, which the senior management determines if the project is worth bidding on. Once the senior management decides to bid on a proposal, they turn it over to the proposal department, who is responsible for estimating all the work and the time it would take to complete the work. Some project managers, like Angelica, prefer to do their own estimates. As Angelica puts it, accepting the estimates as they were submitted in the proposal is like playing Russian roulette. The estimating problem case study spotlights a large company struggling with inaccurate project estimates that are leading to cost overruns, missed deadlines, and client dissatisfaction. The estimating problem is brought to light in the case study as the proposal estimates in the critical package are seriously flawed. The proposal department estimated that in one case, one grade 7 full-time employee was needed for 12 weeks. However, based on Angelica's prior knowledge, she found that the project would take 14 weeks. That's a big difference. 12 to 14 weeks. Here, it is obvious that there is a disconnect between the proposal sales team and the proposal execution team, the engineers and the operation team. One likely cause for this is that the proposal team is under pressure to win contracts, which leads them to develop unrealistic timelines and budgets without consulting technical staff who will actually perform the work. The proposal team based their estimates on the best case scenario or outdated data rather than on actual historical performances or input from subject matter experts. While the team used a 3-point estimate, their assessment is unrealistic. The assessment that the project would only take 4 weeks is reserved for small projects, not complex ones. That is, the critical work would only take 4 weeks. This resulted in frequent change orders, budget increase, and strained the customer relations. Despite repeated project failures and dissatisfaction from both clients and internal stakeholders, the company has not implemented a formal estimating process or involved cross-functional collaboration during the proposal phase. This can spell disaster for a company. The project schedule is a very important aspect of property management. A project schedule is a tool that project managers use to plan, track, and communicate the timeline and milestones of a project. There are 3 main project schedules. There is the detailed project schedule, the master project schedule, and the milestone project schedule. Let's take a deeper look at some of these. A detailed project schedule is a key requirement after receiving a project approval because it also includes the tasks to be completed and determines how resources should be integrated. While the master project schedule is a statement of what will be made, it is an overview of key deliverables and milestones. It also provides a glimpse into the project's major phases and important dates. A milestone schedule, on the other hand, is a highlight of significant events or achievements within the project, which helps track major goals. Impact on project schedule, cost, and scope. So inaccurate estimates can lead to missed deadlines, cost overruns, schedule delays, strain on resources, compromising quality, client dissatisfaction, legal and contractual issues, and scope creep. Let's take a look at some of these for a second here. So if we look at missed deadlines, it's obvious that, if you're saying that the project would take a total of 12 weeks and it actually takes 14 weeks, and you could have found that out had you used a different estimating method, obviously you're going to miss the deadline unless you add more people, which is going to lead to cost overruns. You're going to have scheduling delays because one thing's not done, you can't move to the other thing. You're going to have strain on resources, and that's because you may need to move other people to help move the project along and speed it up, or you're going to have client dissatisfaction. You're going to have compromised quality because people are going to take shortcuts like, you know what, hey, do we really need this? No. But in actuality, it definitely helps to have it. So it's going to lead to those. Legal and contractual issues are based on, you told me this project was going to be done in 12 weeks, and here we are on week 13. How long is it going to take? Oh, we'll definitely have it done in 14 weeks. Well, we're on week 15. Where is it? We're going to go to court on this. So that's kind of how it looks. And then we got scope creep, where you're constantly changing scope in there. So, let's move on to the next section. The critical path. The critical path is the longest sequence of the dependent activity in a project that determines the minimum time required to complete the project. It represents the chain of tasks where any delay will directly impact the project's overall completion date. So let's take a look at this real quick. So the critical path is really the method that involves defining project activities, identifying tasks, estimating durations, that's that 12 weeks, 14 weeks, and constructing a network diagram determining the critical path. So we have from A to B, from B to C, from C to D. That's the path, and it's determining what is critical in there. What is the critical part before you can actually move on? The process ensures a systematic approach to project planning that enables project managers to make informed decisions about the project. So seeing this critical path allows them to make those determinations about the project. The critical path of the schedule in the estimating problem. We can see in the estimating problem, it was estimated that the package, the whole deal, would take about 12 weeks with the requirement of one grade 7 employee. However, Angelica, who is extremely knowledgeable about projects and has done projects very similar to this, estimated that it would take about 14 weeks. So the critical path of a project scheduling, as you know, is a sequence. However, it's very important in estimating the package that the critical point in project management is that there can't be any delays in that. And so it's very important you have a zero float, meaning when you set that schedule, it's a hard deadline. One can't be missed, because if one's missing, it throws everything off. And it severely impacts the project, and that's when you start seeing various different things tumble within the project, and it just all bad. Identifying problems and effects on the critical path for the estimating problem. As we already talked earlier, we could see inaccuracies and unrealistic estimates. We can see delays in the project date. And we can also see overlooking key dependencies and task complexity, which led to the backlog. So inaccurate and unrealistic estimates can seriously disrupt the critical path. When tasks on the critical path are underestimated, they often take longer than expected, directly delaying the project's date. since the critical path has no buffer, meaning like it's hard deadline, when we estimate, we don't say like, okay, 12 weeks, but in reality we expect to complete it in 11 weeks, which would give us that 7-day or 1-week buffer. No, it's not done like that. So it's very important not to miscalculate anything. The 3-point estimate method. So in the case study, they talked about using a 3-point estimate method. The 3-point estimated method is based on 3 factors, which is optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic. So optimistic is a best case scenario, assuming that like everything goes perfect, ideally. Most likely is the most realistic estimate under typical conditions, and pessimistic is the worst case scenario, accounting for potential delays. So let's take a look on how this can be applied, because it can be applied, and it's applied through basically inputting this information into formulas. So let's take a look at some of those formulas. 2 popular formulas are the triangle distribution and the beta or PERT. So the triangle distribution is a fairly simple equation. So you have E equals parentheses O plus M plus P close parentheses divided by 3. Now let's take a look at some of those factors. So E is obviously the estimate, right? So O is the optimistic estimate, M is the most likely estimate, and P is the pessimistic estimate, and you want to divide that by 3 because you're taking the average. So for instance, let's say activity O takes 4 hours, and then M would be 8 as an estimate, and then P would be 16 as an estimate. You're going to add those up. It's going to equal to 28, and then you're going to go ahead and divide that by 3. That's going to give you 9.3 hours as your estimate. Now let's take a look at beta or PERT. It's a little bit more complicated, but the equation looks fairly simple. It's E equals parentheses O plus 4M plus P, and you're going to divide by 6. So in this equation, you're probably looking at the M and wondering like, what does that stand for? And then you're looking at the divide by 6. So the beta distribution is a weighted average, which more weight is given to the most likely estimate, right? That's why you got M, which is the most likely estimate. So you got 4, like where are you getting 4 from, right? So you're getting 4 from the most optimistic estimate, and you're putting that over and timesing it by M in a sense, but actually you're looking more at the normal distribution shape. So in the case of beta or PERT, the distribution has been proven to be more accurate than the 3-point triangulation method. Using the beta distribution, you can determine the level of certainty of a prediction by looking at the variance, and that is obtained by the difference between the pessimistic and the optimistic forecast and dividing it by 6 squared. The variance of the square of the standard deviation. So here you have E equals 4 plus 4 times 8. So M is the most likely, which is 8. Plus 16 divided by 6 equals 52 divided by 6, which is 8.4. Now, how are you getting that? So the standard deviation is measured by the variable from the means and is defined as P minus O divided by 6. So in the sample we gave above, we have the standard deviation, which is 16 minus 4 divided by 6. So that's going to equal 12 divided by 6, which is going to equal 2 hours. This means that using the normal distribution function, there is a 68% chance of the probability of one standard deviation from the means. It means that there is a 68% chance of the schedule having a duration of 8.7 plus or minus 2, which is 6.7 to 10.7. So it's a little bit more complicated. As you can see, there's some other stuff in there as well, because you're taking like the O. So the O falls on the left, which is like 15.9. The M would fall in the middle, which would be like 68.2, as we talked about earlier. And then you have the P, which is going to fall completely on the right, which is 15.9. So the ratio would be O, M, P. So 15.9, 68.2, and 15.9, which is going to equal to 141. So that's where you're looking at. You're translating and you're getting the 4 to the M for it to come out. So like I say, it's kind of complicated, but it's definitely a much more accurate estimate of time. Other estimating techniques are the top down, the bottom down, the parametric, and the analogous. So the analog estimating method is simply looking at similar projects and attributing it to that project. The problem is sometimes while the projects may look similar, you're not actually considering the complexity in them, which could throw your project off. Let's see here. Now you got the top down, and that's pretty much exactly what it is. Top down is looking at something from a high level of project scope and budget, and moving down. The problem with that is that you're not really digging into things, the nitty-gritty of everything. Then you have the bottom up, and obviously that's looking at things from the bottom up, and basically you're going to take everything in your work schedule and you're going to look at it and you're going to estimate it from the bottom all the way up to the top. It's a pretty accurate method, I think. Parametric estimate, and that uses a mathematical equation to make estimates. It relies on specific data such as past cost or time needed for similar tasks. The pro of this is that they're accurate, efficient. However, the con or the negative of it is that it's data dependent. If you don't have the data, you can't make the decisions. Complexity. While it's quite complex to set up the equation and model, you may need some expertise to do it. So basically, it's a complicated system. The estimating problem, assessment of the estimating method. So in the case study, the company appears to be using a top-down analogous estimate with no formal estimating tool. It's not data driven, and they're not using team collaboration, because had they used Angelica could have said, hey, based on my knowledge, this is going to take about 14 weeks. They would have estimated 14 weeks and the project would have been on time. Questionable estimating methods. The results in the case study were definitely unreliable, and the reason they were unreliable is because there was no historical data estimated. The estimating method was made without consulting subject matter experts. The environment encouraged sell bidding. Basically what that is like, I'm gonna make my bid so that I can sell and I can get the project. But the problem with that is underestimating costs and duration actually leads to losses. And the organization also lacked a repeatable estimating process, meaning one estimate is one way, the other estimate is another way, and you never get the same estimate on the same project. Because there's no set standards. So the recommended estimating method that I would use would be a bottom-up estimate, and the estimate would be built from task level. And each package, the bottom-up estimating worksheet would look something like this. So like 1.1, gathering requirements. The resource would be the business analyst. The duration would be about 20 hours. We'd pay a business analyst $70. That would cost us $1,400. For the work breakdown structure, we'd have 2.1 design, UI mockup, UX designer. It's going to take about 30 hours at a rate of 75. That's $2,250. 3.1. The development login module, that's, developing that login module that we're going to use. So that's a back-end developer. Take about 40 hours at a rate of $80. That's $3,200 and so forth. So as you can see, that's why the work structure breakdown, very, very important. The existing or extent estimating process, the pros and the cons. So what's working? The current estimating process, it's definitely speedy, it's simplistic, it's sales orientated and focused, because they're like, hey, we'll make our estimates so we can sell, we can get it. And standardized format, possibly they have a standardized format, but the format's really not working. So let's look at what's not working, or the cons. So here we have a lack of technical input, meaning they're not getting any kind of input from the engineers, the project team, or anybody, subject matter experts. They're just bidding. You got optimistic estimates, meaning their estimates are driven by the desire to win contracts, not by historical performance. They're not using any historical data. There's no formal estimating method, although there appears to be somewhat of a estimating method, but the current approach lacks a structural process. Then you got poor cross-functional collaboration. They're not really collaborating with anybody on their estimates. They're just a team's putting it together, but they're not talking to anybody who knows this stuff. And then you have risk of rework and change orders. Meaning, when they don't estimate right, then there has to be change orders. There has to be this, let's cut this, and it's just really bad situation. So recommended changes. I would recommend implementing a bottom-up estimating, use historical or parametric data, introduce a formal review and sign-off, and develop a central estimating database, align sales and delivery team, and include contingencies and risk buffers. In conclusion, the vicious cycle of unrealistic promises and project underperformance is born out of inaccurate and non-collaborative estimating. In addition, it undermines the very essence of the project management: scope, time, and cost. Ultimately, it erodes client confidence, team morale, and organizational reputation. The estimating method used in the estimating problem case study was inappropriate for the level, or for the risk level and complexity of the project. While the existing top-down approach to estimating prioritized speed and sales, the top-down approach should have been shifted to a bottom-up approach. By adopting a more structured, data-driven, and collaborative approach, the company could have improved project outcome and strengthened its reputation. With that, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it.